So welcome everyone. Thanks for wanting to attend this session on business models and trying to analyze whether we can get to a place of profitability and scalability within our models. It's a pretty deep topic, as I discussed with Ram. It's, you know, this is not for the faint-hearted. We're going to be looking deep into you know, the underlying mechanics of building a business that can scale. So just to run through some of the initial points, I'm pretty sure you guys would be aware of what a business model canvas is. It's like a high level representation of the key elements, although not all of them. It's very much a kind of like an overview. So it provides a lot more flexibility than writing a business plan, which is typically, you know, 30, 50, 80 pages long. And one of the reasons why we use a business model canvas more often than we would use a business plan, although business plans still have a use case for sure, particularly when it comes to capital raising and various other elements. The reason why, you know, the canvas exists is so that we can update things as we learn a lot quicker than going through and spending half a day or an entire day rewriting a business plan. And business plans, yeah, tend to be, yeah, sort of suggest, I mean, if you really get to a stage that you've got a really mature understanding of what you're doing, then obviously that's a really cool, great segue into kind of transitioning into planning it out and getting more granular in the details. So there's also an interesting point. So we could have talked about the lean canvas today. And one of the reasons why we chose not to is that it's missing a few elements that are critical to the fundamentals of business, right? So the lean canvas doesn't actually have the key partners square. So it sort of paints the picture that, you know, if we create a business, then it can be standalone and kind of sit outside the product and service ecosystem, which is almost never the case, right? Typically, you're part of a supply chain of some sort, and you sort of have to cooperate with others and co-create with others in various ways. It also gives us the opportunity to kind of reflect on what would need to be true for the business model to work. So different business models work at different times for different reasons. So for example, Zoom was doing okay before COVID-19, but actually during COVID-19, they just had the right, the right features at the right time, and they just rode the crest of the wave. I don't think blue jeans went quite as well, and I can't remember exactly which feature kind of differentiated it, but Simon Horn typically talks about, maybe it was the free tier that you know, users particularly liked. So yeah, one of the things to think about while doing your business model canvas is to think about what product and service ecosystem that you're in, and also, I guess, yeah, one of the things that the business canvas doesn't really promote is really drilling into the details deeply, although you kind of need to do that as well. So you need to have a global perspective on what's happening, but also a really granular perspective, and you need to kind of shift all, you know, through all the different lenses of analysis on your business, and that's not easy to do. In fact, on Monday, I will be presenting on market research to help us like shift between all the lenses, and also try to eliminate certain biases that we have within our thinking. And yeah, it's impossible not to have these biases, unfortunately, whether that be confirmation bias or preference bias or a whole variety of other things. Also, there's quite an interesting book called The Business Model Generator, which I read a couple of years ago. And that might be an interesting book just to reflect on, just to see what kind of business models. I think they advocate for about 5 or 6 different possibilities of the types of companies that tend to exist in the world and analyze what their models are and kind of reverse engineer why they work. I've also got another quite scary document that I was sent during the Tropical Innovation Festival that outlines 55 different business models that have been reported over the years to have worked, and kind of the underlying mechanics about why they work. So let's take a look at, so I ran a poll on business model canvases, and it was actually quite startling how little, focus there is on doing the business model canvas. So just within LinkedIn, I created a poll that asked the question, like, how often do you, revisit your business model or create a business model? And thankfully, of this group, we've already had 2 that have responded back with, like in real time, with their business model canvases presented to me. So that means that we're in quite a high performing group here. But actually, yeah, in the mainstream world, most people either don't know what it is, or they do know what it is, but they never get around to doing it. And they never have it reviewed by anyone. So of 474 people that viewed that post, only 1 person responded with never as their answer. So it's not a very sexy topic. I often will set people a bit of homework to go through and set out their business model canvas. It can take about 10 to 15 minutes to put together. And yeah, often, yeah, people aren't inclined to do it for whatever reason. But particularly if you're innovating with business model, then getting it wrong is not great. It makes life a lot more difficult than it needs to be. So I just thought I would share with you just like an overview, and I can provide this as like reading materials after the session. So let me just try to share with you my screen. Share screen. Okay, let's do that. So you can see my screen now, and here's a list of the 52 business model. It's like there's certain patterns of types of businesses that tend to work, and these are the different models, and they've all got different like components. So it's not like a combustion engine whereby you've got a typical set of components. It's like you've got combustion engine, and then a hydrogen powered engine, and then an electrical engine, and then 53 other ones, which are quite different. So let's just run through A. So add-on, affiliation, whatever a Kaidu is. I need to myself spend a little bit of time trying to read and understand all of these different patterns that have been researched. And yeah, the devil is in the detail there. With the way they fit together. And on the surface, it seems like we can quite easily understand how a business works and creates shareholder value and profitability. But actually, yeah, sometimes it's more difficult and less intuitive and less logical than it appears. So with that aside, let's continue on and discuss a few more things. But yeah, one of the points that is important to kind of take away from this whole idea, and one that you've probably heard me talk about quite often, is the importance of focusing in on the one product or service at one time, because each of them are quite difficult to get right because of all the different components and the counterintuitive, counterlogical aspects of actually making it work through trial and error. So if you've got, so just as a side example, and maybe, I've talked to you, many of you guys before about this situation, but I was involved in a project out of Washington, DC, which was in the HR tech phase, HR tech industry. And at the start, when the founder first came to me, we actually broke down that they had about 13 to 14 different product categories kind of incorporated within their offering. And it was my job. They knew that they had to focus. They didn't know which one to focus on. So I kind of led them through the process of actually picking a winner, picking a winner based on product and service category that they wanted to kind of go after. And I think that they chose the right one. And that startup is now going really well. It's hiring and scaling, and they may have actually got VC funding behind it. So it is definitely about, you know, trying to pick a winner in a complex and confusing marketplace. So business model reviews. So these are quite difficult to do, but one thing that I think is really important is to try to expose your business model to as many people as possible who you think can add value and perspective to things. And then ask them to make comments or observations on various aspects of what you're doing. And what that allows to have happen, much in the same way as going through an accelerator program, is it kind of allows you to shape the product and service. Different people can add different levels of value based on, you know, how much knowledge they've got in a particular space or with respect to a particular business model. So we've all got our kind of more familiar models and more familiar industries. But yeah, almost all of the time I can add at least some value to a model through just kind of servicing and making observations along the way. Obviously, you do have to pass that information. You do have to process that information as a founder and make sure that the comments hold water and are true in the light of day in your perspective. That's not very easy to do either. So that's where a lot of the challenges of entrepreneurship originate from. And yeah, I mean, why is it scary to have a business model review? Well, fundamentally, if someone finds something that, you know, requires quite a bit of a deviation or a shift, then obviously that has an impact on the venture, the team, the product, and a whole variety of other things. And that's why, you know, as you're going through different models on your journey to market and early adoption and traction, that's effectively what kind of thrusts you into that valley of death where you may or may not come out. And so definitely make use of perspectives that can be brought to your business model earlier rather than later. That's what I would say. And many of you here are very proactive, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't. So you're always welcome. I'm always happy to kind of provide feedback and insight as you require within the context of the program. And you'll probably see me around town as well. So happy to provide some insights and some observations that might help along the way. Another reason why founders perhaps delay on having their business model review is that they've got a level of confidence that, you know, they've figured it out and it's not going to change and all that kind of thing. But as entrepreneurs, we have to be extremely flexible to the market realities and be very adaptive as we learn. So really what we're trying to do is optimize the rate at which we learn about what model is actually going to work in the medium and long term. And on top of that, sometimes when we go to market, we'll go to market with one model and then we'll shift later as we scale and as we gain traction and potentially investment. So those are some of the complexities around that. So questions that I'd be asking myself as a founder would be, you know, how many times have I kind of surfaced my business model with business advisors, people that can add value and help that through that commercialization process, domain experts, and anyone else that you think, people from the supply chain that might give some perspective on things. So it's a real fact-finding mission. And beyond just the business model, so what I used to do before Business Station was to offer 360 diagnostic reviews, which are like real deep dives. So founders used to give me like a huge pack of documents, and then I used to go through and make observations and comments on various components of what they were doing, just to inform them and sort of shed light on things that they may have not considered, which requires a lot of confidence and courage to actually open your vault effectively and allow your baby to see the light of day. And often those comments can be the quickest way to mature a venture. And that's effectively what an accelerator program is. And accelerator programs are obviously quite numerous. They tend to be hard models to operate because they require so much expertise. And the best accelerator models have the best mentors. So say Y Combinator and 500 Startups are the biggest and most famous ones. I think Techstars has still got quite a good reputation as well. And so effectively what you're doing within an accelerator program is kind of crowdsourcing input. And I know particularly Natalie and Trang and Elizabeth are really good at wanting to include people along that journey as advisors. And I have written a quite a short piece on, who do I select for my advisory board to help with analysis of a lot of these key documents. So what a review allows you to do is deepen the granularity of your understanding and also kind of overlay your advisor's understanding on how this element of the world actually works. And what that should allow you to do over the course of time is align yourself to achieve external market fit as soon as possible. And you could even get to the level of understanding of the external market fit before your product is released, in which case it's going to be a nice launch. But if you don't get to that stage before release, then obviously you're going to have some challenges along the way, and you might have to relaunch a couple of times. But it is what it is. It's very difficult to independently kind of know where you're up to on your learning curve. Once you've done the learning, like in hindsight, you'd be like, oh, of course, so obvious now that I know these like 3 or 4 elements that weren't on the radar. But that's another reason to kind of involve advisors, is to increase your awareness of and strengthen your radar systems so that you understand what's lurking potentially. Maybe you think you've got your pricing model right, but maybe you haven't. And it's just that alone that is preventing you from succeeding. So yeah, those are just some thoughts. Model pivots are often required as you gain traction and grow. So you'll hit kind of glass ceilings along the way when you hit the limitations of the current model. Tim Ferriss talks about that in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. So often when you're working super hard at something and you're not getting a lot of return on your efforts, that means that your model might not be right. This obviously applies post-launch. And it's not just market fit, unfortunately. And I'll take a note to share with you some quite advanced kind of blogs that have been written by, I think it's Bill Balfour. He talks about the rest of the fits. Obviously there's market fit, there's channel fit, and then there's model fit. So getting all of those in shape is not that easy. And you need to solve the whole puzzle before you're going to get traction, right? And so when people enter the digital solutions program, I've got an unfortunate kind of tendency to like deep dive. And so certain people love that. They're like, oh my God, you're going into the machine code of the mechanics of my startup. But for others, it's like quite confronting. But yeah, effectively, you know, when someone comes to digital solutions, often they're coming for, you know, a marketing related issue or a sales related issue or something like that. Whereas what the real issue could be a lot more fundamental than that, could relate to their current model, delivery model, revenue model, you know, a whole variety of different things that kind of contribute to an inefficient service delivery and profitability. So when we do a model review, we look at each element separately. And obviously I'll need to gain your permissions if you're wanting to, otherwise we can take it offline and, you know, we can talk about it at length, either for, you know, Trang and Elizabeth's model or Natalie's model. We can just take a quick look at them. Obviously requiring more time to like do a deep dive and ask all those like questions that allow us to progress through that process of getting to the model that works. But often, I think, yeah, another reason that people don't get a model review is they're like waiting for launch. So they'll be waiting, and then they'll launch and things won't work. And they'll be like, why is that? So sometimes it's a real good opportunity to actually have a model review before you launch. And the guys from the HR tech venture, which I did the review for, they were extremely proactive. They were like asking for advice on just about everything, which is great. Like, it's really good to see. And they were progressing at such a rate of knots. Like, the amount of transformation that they were going through is crazy. And that's what you need to do within the context of doing a tech startup. So yeah, imagine you get 99% of the model right, and then one of the elements of your business model is not scalable, or, you know, perhaps it's not profitable. Then you still don't have a model that works. So yeah, we need to go through individually and figure out all the pieces, see how they all fit, and make sure that you know, the inputs reward the founder for all the work that they've done. Often what I've found is that key partnerships are required to scale. So key partnerships with the incumbents in the industry. So I think that that's going to feature very heavily, particularly with your project, Natalie, and also Elizabeth and Trang's, and probably in the future with yours as well, Ram. You're probably going to do a soft launch not too far into the future, and then ultimately some sort of partnership for some sort of reason will probably be required in order to distribute quicker or embed within other products, or whatever the case may be, whatever you find to be the winning combo. Also, there's, you know, when we're setting up a venture, we need to make sure that all the alignments are thought about. There's a really interesting resource online called Sales Benchmark Index, which kind of takes a look at how aligned an organization is internally and with the external market reality. So what it sort of depicts is companies moving from chaos all the way through to heavily kind of standardized, repeatable, predictable organizations. So those kind of models, I think it's called the revenue growth maturity model that they reference, can kind of give you an understanding about where you might be up to in your journey from chaos to predictability. But the chaos is required, because effectively what you're doing is you've got a Rubik's Cube here and you're trying to solve, and then you get to 99% and there's like one square not right, and you're like, oh shit, I need to rewire everything again. So that's effectively the journey that you're going through. You're like reshuffling everything until all of the bits of the puzzle kind of fit into place. So in terms of business model viability, so yeah, okay, no worries. Okay, so I've just received positive acceptance of having a business model reviewed. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. So in terms of business model viability, at all stages, so, you know, when you're shuffling around, you're doing your Rubik's Cube, often you can solve a lot of problems, but then you can create some as well. So you might create a product that people really want, but they're not willing to pay for it. And that's an issue that I've come up in the past. Like, people really value the kind of inputs that I have, but it's very difficult to kind of have a commercial model around accelerating startups, because startups are very cash poor throughout their entire journey. And there's a natural preference for them to want to invest money elsewhere, like in development and design and all that kind of thing, and kind of neglects the acceleration piece. So that obviously has hampered my own personal business model viability. There's also, yeah, it's important to get us to a level of understanding where you understand the unit economics. And one of the reasons why startups aren't successful is that they go through all these different pivots, and then they end up with a model that, you know, can't actually create profitability because the costs are actually outweighing the what they can charge for doing this particular process, whatever it happens to be. Business model canvas, you know, we can also look at all the elements that inhibit profitability. So we analyze different use cases and kind of go through, and we can sort of analyze those growth blockers that stop us from expanding in a very, you know, a dimension of operating that model. And a business model, in order to get it right, you sort of have to operate it and then see what happens and then fine tune it. So if you're always pre-launch, then you're actually not necessarily making a lot of progress on your understanding. So that's one of the difficult things in kind of, you know, if you're going to create a tech product that takes even 6 months or 2 years, you're actually not actively operating the business. You're pre-launch. But in that pre-launch phase, the best thing that you can do is receive external input to help you approximate what that right model will be. But so if you get it 20% right, then obviously you're going to have a lot more pain in the future than getting it to 95% right pre-launch. So yeah, lean on advisors, lean on experts to scrutinize things, but I guess listen more to people that have had experience launching products, and particularly those that have succeeded. But often people that haven't succeeded, there might be a really good reason why the market wasn't right or whatever, and they've still internalized a lot of learnings along the way. Yeah, so we could take a look now at Elizabeth and Trang's business model. Just to take a look at what the format of a business model is, and also to make some high-level comments and observations about what might be true about it. So we never get too, I guess, arrogant or overconfident in our perspectives, because they are perspectives and they've got a certain level of value and validity, but it's very difficult to be extremely confident about how reality works in this world. So based on the complexity of it. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. Really do appreciate your volunteering. I'm just going to share with you my screen, and then we're going to open You can see some of my comments down there anyway. Let's take a look here. So yeah, thanks for going through the canvas. And so just to give you some background about what Elizabeth and Trang are up to. So they were operating a startup in the femtech, kind of the sexual products industry. And then they came across a really cool opportunity to kind of like acquire, but more like kind of buy into an existing structure that was already doing something quite similar. Yeah, so we've been talking about how they get involved and how they kind of, yeah, like replace the founding team over the course of time as they become clearer and clearer about how to operate this particular business model. So so let's just run through the squares so people are aware of like what is going on, like what the key components of a business model canvas are. So number one is the key partners, which, yeah, as I said before, Lean Canvas doesn't have that. Key activities. And I think one of the downsides of this particular design is it's difficult to interpret exactly what some of these, what they mean by these things. So for example, customer relationships, obviously, yeah, you want transparent, warm, yeah, creating a social movement, growth, all that kind of thing. But does that really answer this square? It may or may not. So the only additional advice, which isn't very helpful, is your customer relationships. So it might, another way of using the square might be, what does customer service look like? Like, what is the customer service model? So is it, you know, is there a level of personal touch to it, or is it quite transactional, or is it, you know, a combination thereof? There's a lot of literature on, you know, forging the right customer relationships, and it's quite a difficult thing to achieve at scale. So we have to be very careful as well with how we operate within Business Station, because, yeah, we're meeting such a large variety of people with a whole variety of perspectives and levels of understanding about all these different things. So let's start with the key partners. So it looks like there are a lot of key partners. Oh, okay, the first comment actually was, yeah, you've used a lot of these tags, which is good, but that means you haven't finished, which understandably, in order to really understand the full, the fullness of the business model, you need to understand the unit economics to make sure that cost structure isn't higher than revenue stream. Because I think founders often are under the impression, just keep going, you know, the tide will turn at some stage, and sometimes it does, but it's important to keep track of, you know, what's worth doing and what's not within this system that we live in. So yeah, we can't assess the underlying economics at this stage. Another comment that I had was there are a lot of key partnerships, there are a lot of activities, there's a lot of everything, there's a lot of channels, but there aren't a lot of founders at this stage, unless I'm wrong. So just remember that we're gonna have to do all this work as well. And, you know, but potentially this has already been set up, because Elizabeth and Trang are in a unique situation that they're kind of buying into a business that already operates and probably has a really good understanding about a lot of these elements of the business model already. And they've got a really good opportunity to actually operate within the business for a number of years in order to understand what the real hierarchy, like who is the really important key partners. Like you could probably only have 2 or 3. You can't have like all of these, because otherwise you're just managing too many relationships, unless you scale, which that that gives you the opportunity and the capacity to, oh, have we got a question? Yes, okay. So some of this has already been set up in every Australian okay, cool. So yeah, as I say, happy to be wrong as well. It's just like observation of how I imagine, but yeah, that's really good. So then the challenge will be, okay, we've got established relationships set up over the course of many years. How do we maintain all of those? And there could be a really easy way of doing that. For myself, I've got like a CRM full of different relationships that I kind of like have to keep warm and productive at all times. And yeah, that's a key point. That's part of my job as with the stakeholder management piece. So at some stage, the previous founder will need to start to hand over those relationship responsibilities, making sure that there's, you know, you understand the history of those relationships and you understand all the details that are involved. So this ability of buying into the business and operating as almost like employees for a period of time is a great process, because you're learning about all of these elements, and you're tracking. You can even track your process as you progress, as you learn more and more about the nature and the kind of deal structure of all of these particular relationships. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of key activities, but if you're entering into a new business, then a lot of this might have already been streamlined. And that's something that you're looking for when you're kind of deciding whether to get involved or to what level, is to just understand how mature this whole, you know, the organization is around all of these things. Or is the founder working 100 hours a week just to keep the, you know, the lights on? Versus, you know, the kind of 4-hour work week idealized model where you the founder just has to press a few buttons on the keyboard and everything kind of takes care of itself. Those are the obvious two extremes of the same continuum. Value proposition. This is another area that it seemed, yeah, it's very hard to for me to comment on these because I haven't actually seen the product. So maybe in the next sessions, we can dig into this a little bit more. It seems to, yeah, on the surface of it, they seem, what you've got here seems to make a bit of sense. And because it's already been operating in the market, then there's a lot more validity around, you know, understanding whether we're correct about value proposition, because anyone can come up with a value proposition, but whether it's a true value proposition or not is obviously something we need to always question. But over the course of time, I guess you'll get a better granularity of understanding whether this is the most accurate way of describing the value propositions. Early adopter segments. Yeah, that's, yeah, LGBTQI plus peoples. Yeah, of course, that I can understand why that would be the case. You know, it would be interesting to see what the percentage breakdown is between all of these different kind of customer segments. And they're probably procuring the products all for different reasons. So without more information, it's difficult for me to understand. I can perfectly understand the LGBTQI plus peoples, but me myself right now can't map how the value propositions map to governments, maybe medical centers. I can sort of imagine educational departments, but in my head right now, I can't map them. But that's not to say it's not the case, right? It's just, I need a bit more time to understand that. And later adopters for Darcy. Yeah, okay. And there's probably a few more in there actually that maybe in our next session we can take a look at, because I have come across some other communities that might find these kind of products quite alluring, and new channels that maybe you haven't really tapped into that have only just recently come to be. Key resources, employees. So let's see, does it give any guidance? What are your key resources? Yeah, it's not very nebulous. It's a very nebulous kind of description. So yeah, employees, IP, computer software, expert knowledge, financials. Yeah, that sounds more or less, yeah, what I would expect. And then channels, supermarkets, virtual clinics, bathrooms. Okay, yeah, I can understand that. Like at the pub or various other places that, or I don't know, maybe public toilets and all that kind of thing. Petrol stations. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know which of these channels, what the breakdown is of sales between all these channels, to understand where we should be kind of applying our time in the most high leverage way. And then, yeah, cost structure and all that kind of thing. Hard to tell at this point. You know, how profit is made. So it'd be interesting for you guys, once you get in on the project a little bit more and are able to do not just due diligence, but also learn a bit more about the underlying mechanics, like actually see where the profit comes from and how, you know, which products are the most profitable, which ones are less profitable, why that might be, and all that kind of thing. And yeah, if the gentleman who you're kind of buying into his business in effect, it'd be interesting to see, you know, review like Xero and the P&L statements, and just to understand that in a little bit more detail. So what we can do, if you need assistance with that, we've got a guy called Kelby Williams who takes a look at you know, reviewing P&L and helping make decisions on that basis. Excellent. Well, I'll just check if I've got any more comments. Stop sharing right now. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that it might be worth doing in order to kind of understand the business in even more detail and granularity is to create a business model per product. And what that would allow you to do is map between all the different entries on a per product basis. Yeah, that might clean up the understanding a little bit more even. Okay, yeah, we've talked about many of these things already. Yeah, okay, yeah. Excellent, alrighty. So maybe, I'm not sure if you guys have gone to Avant-Garde Capital already, but always happy to, as I said, drill a little bit deeper into the whole model and see where everything's at, and ask all the questions that need asking. Natalie, did you want us to take a quick look at what you're up to, or would you prefer to kind of take it offline and Okay, so Natalie says it was very useful to see another BM. Okay, yeah, so, okay, receiving. I had one more insight for my own, thank you. Okay, so you're saying, yeah, let's take a quick look at yours as well. And the guys from Elizabeth and Trang are off to see Avant-Garde Capital in the week, yeah, next week. So that's great. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what Natalie is up to. So let me just reopen what needs to be reopened. Cool. Okay, I'll just share my screen again, and then we'll kick off. Cool. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. So we've been in contact for at least 3 or 4 months now. So Natalie came into the Brisbane Business Hub and we had a quick conversation about what she was up to. She's also been through an acceleration program, or multiple acceleration programs. The one that UCube have offered, which I think is quite reputable. And also you're now enrolling with, I think, the CSIRO or one of the other kind of more industry-led acceleration processes, which is really exciting. So my first comment is that this is quite a clean canvas, which means, it's not overloaded. And it's pretty clear. So the efforts that you've gone to go through this acceleration process, we can see the fruits of that with what you've presented. So in terms of having your business model reviewed, I guess you had different aspects. Okay, CSIRO and Climate Kick, that's really cool. I know the guys from Climate Kick and I know the guys from CSIRO, and yeah, it is recommended, like, as long as they're not like taking too much equity, it's important to try to go through at least an acceleration service, if not an accelerator itself. So a lot of the accelerators that Natalie's been through are kind of like not-for-profit accelerators, as opposed to commercial accelerators that take percentages. Founders can be taken advantage of a little bit, although it's kind of a two-way street. Accelerators can be taken advantage of as well. So yeah, I mean, accelerators sometimes don't give you great valuations, and I think that that's one of the areas that is of concern. But at the same token, accelerators are taking quite a high level of risk in involving themselves and investing their time in what you're doing. So they need to believe in what your future females. Oh wow, okay, so you've you've gone through the whole gauntlet, and probably more to come as well. So that's just a really good example of Natalie being extremely resourceful. So the comments that I had was, looks good so far. In my mind, because I'm still quite new to your project, even though I understand the fundamentals and the kind of the premise of what you're doing, it's difficult for me in my mind to kind of understand the level of validation. So maybe when we catch up next, if you're wanting to rejoin Digital Solutions again, we can go into more detail and you can explain, if I ask a particular question, then you can provide some validation and comfort around your understanding of a particular dimension of your model. One of the big one for me is around the value proposition side. It's all amazing stuff, personally, I'm extremely interested in clean tech and a whole variety of ways that we can, more or less save the world from running out of resources and just consuming the rest of the natural world, which is what we're on track to do. One of the concerns about the value propositions is that for idealists like myself and yourself, Natalie, and wanting to commit to action and transformation in this space, one of the challenges, I think, is that people only have a certain level of effort and energy to undertake these kind of activities. So we need to be really specific on who we work with and make sure that they're fully bought in to this whole journey together. And then once we've kind of worked with, some die-hard early adopters, then the journey might become easier. But in the early stages, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. So in regards to your customer segments, I guess you're down at the level now that you're so you've mentioned you've got an early adopter in the mining space. And I think you mentioned an exact company. So my imagination would lead me to believe that you would probably focus in on one sector at a time based on who your biggest kind of fan or strongest kind of diehard wanting to, make a difference company would be. And often within a company of a certain scale, you'll have a variety of people that want to get on board. And then you've got people that are a little bit more resistant to actually, getting on board and driving that change through the rest of the organization. Because, yeah, effectively what you're doing is you're surfacing knowledge that can be used in order to drive action. But often, you need more than just information for people to take action. They have to be kind of emotionally bought into it as well. So I think that that's going to be one of the challenges in actually operating this model. So yeah, I mean, if you were to present this in front of like collaborators and these are all, yeah, so 2 points here. If you're going to present this in front of collaborators and even investors, to get down and actually list out, who is interested and what stage of the deal they're at, that provides a certain level of tangibility. So a lot of this you've drilled in quite deeply, which is cool. But yeah, just think about that in terms of the customer segments, and obviously as part of your pitch deck when you're raising capital, actually having name brands on there that you've got really close and well constructed kind of collaborations with is gonna make a huge amount of difference. Yeah, UQ. So just to share with you guys, what Natalie's doing that's fantastic is she's pulling in resources from all sorts of different organizations. So CSIRO, Climate Kick, Future Females, and UQ. And each of them offer to her a different value proposition and a different way of helping her shape and progress through the commercialization journey. Yeah, why not just take as much advantage of this kind of process as possible? So very good work on that account. Another comment is, so you've mentioned Australia and Latin America. So obviously just to comment on how different these geographies could be, because obviously governments and different governments and companies and attitudes, beliefs, values can vary dramatically within a population of a country, but there's a certain level of, how would you say, kind of cohesion of a view. Like there is a mainstream view that people have. So for example, Australia doesn't tend to be a very kind of, would you say, proactive when it comes to outside of solar, and I think electric vehicles will come along in the next couple of years. But Australia doesn't tend to take the lead on some of these climate initiatives when perhaps, European countries might be the cutting edge, for example, Germany and the UK and Scandinavian countries. So as an early adopter market, you might find traction there if you can't find it in these other geographies. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't people that are deeply concerned about this and you can't find them and you can't do deals with them. It just might be that it's a little bit more difficult at the moment. And, things change all the time. So we just have to keep a pulse on attitudes and markets as they shift. Yeah, I would love to see what you've created, Natalie, just to give me some kind of more context and more understanding of what you're up to. Yeah, we've talked about making sure that we accurately understand the intentions behind why someone would use this. Maybe you've got those answers through customer discovery. I do know that you take on board feedback really quickly and are quite adaptive in that approach. And I do know that I think your understanding, like fidelity of understanding of how the world works is pretty good. So that's really encouraging. And I'd be keen to hear a little bit more about the conversations that you've had, and maybe even being devil's advocate just to make sure, you know, cover all bases and you know, make sure that we've got the most accurate, least biased perspective on where things are headed. Yeah, so my other comment was on the cost structure and revenue streams. Looks good, looks like a really nice breakdown. You've obviously potentially needed to do that as part of your capital raising exercises. So that kind of forces you to take a look at those things in a bit more detail. Yeah, definitely keep me updated on how that's going. But yeah, until you operate the model, it's difficult to know and validate all elements, and they can change all the time as well as your priorities and your strategy evolves through execution. So it's important to keep real clear tabs. But the kind of customers you're going after are pretty big. You know, they're B2B. They've got large contracts. You know, you've got large amounts of revenue, very established part of the market, and under a significant amount of pressure to do something. Even though we'd like them to do more, they can be resistant at times. So they sort of compromise on what can we do that's easy without fundamentally changing our business model and pulling ourselves out of shape. So there's a lot of internal tensions within these kind of sectors, which I'm sure you're becoming more increasingly aware of, and then perhaps forming an opinion about which of these segments is likely to kind of yield the kind of the easiest way of doing business as an early adopter segment. Cool. Well, I look forward to catching up on all of those things. Did anyone have any questions on what we've discussed to date? If you need to talk, just let me know and I can unmute you. Put your hand up. Doesn't seem like it. Obviously, you've either got way too many questions and you're kind of gobsmacked, or you completely understand what I've said, and you'll be able to go away and like implement all the different kind of new insights that you've got. Excellent. Alrighty. Well, yeah, definitely let's catch up quite soon, Natalie. And that goes for anyone that's in attendance. Would love to help you as much as possible. I know you're all doing great things. So what we can do is just, if you'd like a session or to expedite your next session, just send me an email. I can send that to you at tristan@businessstation.com.au, and yeah, book a session and we can go through your business model and try to see how to optimize it and make some tweaks and fine-tune things, and yeah, discover opportunity to improve on a continuing basis. Alrighty, guys, that's enough from me for now. Have a great lunch if you're in Queensland, and have a good morning tea if you're in Perth. So bye for now. Thanks for attending.